Hello and welcome to the Long Island Melee 2024 Pokemon Draft PR. Woo! Give a big round of applause. First off, I just want to say thank you all for joining me here, listening to this YouTube video, and coming along. And also drafting and being a part of this. I greatly appreciate it. And I hope that over the course of the season, you all have a wonderful time and you all have tons of fun. Now, just going over it real quick, these are all of your drafts, and I will be flipping back and forth between this page. Maybe not constantly, but just to show you what is and is not on the board still. A brief section to show you like maybe what you can and can't do better, and just to help you improve your drafts and think about drafts more. Give me 1 second. I am actually going to go and do something real quick. So, as you all know, I've played in drafts before, and I have a bunch of friends who are good in draft. And I'm going to join up with. I'm going to join into a Discord call, and if anyone hops in, they are more than welcome to commentate on your prep. Let me do that real quick before I forget. Also, I don't know how to edit or upload YouTube videos, so this is just going to be unedited podcast style. There'll still be a visual component because I'm still like moving my mouse. And, like, you can see things. But, yeah. Let me go and do that now. Okay. Let me let them know. Okay, and now that is out of the way, let me get to your drafts here. Now, I think that you all, going into this, firstly, I think you all did a wonderful job. I truly and genuinely think you all did a great job, despite the comments that I might say going forward. I think every draft is usable, and every draft will be able to win at least 1 or 2 games, I hope. And most importantly, I hope that you all have fun doing this. And I think that everyone drafted at the bare minimum a fun draft. I don't think that there's any draft where someone's going to use it and they're going to go, oh, I didn't have fun with this. And I think that that is really important, and I think that that is a good benchmark that you have all hit, and I'm very happy that you all have hit. Okay, so let's jump into, also, before I forget, do not take my word as gospel, or just because I rank your draft as the 10th best draft, it doesn't mean that it's actually bad, or just because I place your draft as the first best draft, it doesn't mean it's actually the best draft and that you're going to win the whole thing. It's just an approximation of how I feel and what you should be looking for and expecting out of your draft, and how I think you're going to do. You could hypothetically be the top ranked team and get 0 wins and go out in playoffs before playoffs and just be terrible and awful. And it looks like 2 people have joined. Okay, are you guys speaking?
Yeah, no, it's PastaSupper, and I guess he can introduce himself. Oh, SunSun.
These are 2 very well established and esteemed players. I do like the both of these. I'm just going over like what a PR means, because I don't think that they've ever really played Pokemon drafts before. Yeah. But firstly, let me show you 2 something that I think is going to shock and blow your head off.
Better not be a replay.
No, it is not a replay. There have been replays. I have not I've looked at them, but they're not that bad. Look at what is still available on the board. Latias.
I did.
I mean,
I did see that earlier.
I don't expect people
torn.
to know like how good some of these are. So,
Yeah.
it's the first time, it's hard to gauge how good something is.
Oh
Yeah, I know. I just thought that it was worth pointing out and that it was worth looking at. Just
Oh yeah.
these Pokemon are definitely the cream of the crop. Well, not Necrozma, but these 4 Pokemon are definitely the cream of the crop. They were just not
For
taken.
Terras, absolutely. Yeah, this gen is hard, especially with Terra, because it's like usually you want to draft around your Terra. And so it's like these really high point Terra guys, it's like kind of what you gun for most of the time. But I see, like, I'm looking at the board now, it's like there's some pretty interesting teams with some interesting Terras still. Like, I see
I like
Terra
this-
Metagross. I rate that highly. I think it's cool.
I like this T-Tar Excadrill core where the Terra is the T-Tar.
Yeah, we might be getting a
Well-
bit ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we'll go over it. I have them all ranked in the prep doc over here. And what I did first was I made a team myself, just of what mons were on the board, to give them like a baseline of what I'm looking for. So this actually isn't a draft that I can use or play with, but this is like just roughly what I want out of a draft myself. Oh, you know what I can do? Can I screen share my screen to you guys? That's gonna be wow. I'm
I was
so
just gonna follow
good.
along on my own. All is good.
This
Whatever works
go
best.
live. Wow, this is crazy. This was my draft that I made, and I just used the mods at the end. I'm not actually playing it again. But this is like what I'm looking for in a draft, and I guess I'll kind of break down my thought
If you're
process
lagging,
here.
you can either turn off the stream.
Happy I
or-
wouldn't stream. Yeah, we'll follow along. It's just
also,
a little
support-
laggy.
This is the highest quality. You could even lower the quality of the stream.
Oh, yeah.
Like, stop stream.
Like I think 1440p, 60 FPS. Like that's not needed for a Google Sheets.
Okay.
Like,
Perfect. Yeah, we'll just follow along. It's all good.
Okay, sorry about that. So this is my team that I drafted using the Pokemon that were left over on the board after everyone has drafted. Again, just to show you what I think, what I'm looking for in a team and what I strive for. So the first thing that I did was I picked up Latias. It's just the best mon on the board. It's not the best mon left on the board. I think that there are other good Pokemon on the board. And the fact that it was just left for me to take at the end of the draft is kind of crazy, especially when it can Terra and it can do so much. And then after that, I really wanted to hit something that could be kind of fast. There weren't very many 120 mons left on the board, but I thought Sneasler worked out fine. I really like it. I think it pairs well with Latias, and as you'll see, Chi-Yu. And I think that it's just all around a good mon that's very fast with Unburden. And the way that I'm imagining it is that I placed my draft in your draft, and so I see through your teams you have like Excadrill and Tyranitar, and like that's like a speedy core. You have like these weird like rain cores that I want to outspeed. There's a sun team with a roaring moon, and so that Unburdenmon I think helps me with the draft in those upcoming weathers. Same thing was my idea behind Terapagos. Terapagos is a mon that I'm not too big of a fan of, personally, if you've spoken to me, but it gets great utility in Rapid Spin, and it's a non-ground type that's set Stealth Rock, and it can also Toxic this generation, which is very big.
wait,
Were you going to say something?
I didn't know that toxic. Fair products. Oh, it did. Nice.
Wow. Okay.
Surprised me there.
Yeah.
It's a good all-rounder. Yeah.
Um,
Terapagos is fucking weird shit.
sorry.
I don't know. No, it's just alright. I'm just talking. Terapagos is a fucking weird Pokemon.
Yes, I think it is. You two have spoken to me, and I do not think that it is that great, but I think it works fine, and it was like the only available Rapid Spinner left, besides I think Cyclozar was still legal, but I didn't want to like draft Cyclozar, so I just threw that on my team. And then GU to help wall break. I thought it would be good. I thought it would be fun. Hiton, I really needed a steel and a fairy type. It can also set stealth rockets and can set screens, thunderwave, swords dance, play rough, gigaton hammer. Just an all-around great utility mon that I think is probably the second best utility mon behind Lando. I would say that's just my rough approximation. And then Sinistra for my other Terra is a mon that I've been really big on. I really like the ghost typing. I think Matcha Gotcha is really good, and I think it'll pair well with Latias. And then Earthworm to just give me Spike, Stealth Rock, and a ground immunity, and Gligar to be a ground flying type.
I'm curious, is Chatel allowed? I'm assuming
Uh,
no, right?
Shedtail is not allowed, no.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And sorry, were you gonna say something?
Oh yeah, no, it's just this graph, it encapsulates some roles too. Like every team needs a breaker, and you got great breaker and GU, special breaker. There's good utility. There's great setup. This is the kind of you're also thinking about roles and types when you're making your team, which is a little that's where the hard part really comes in. It's easy to make the little bar there you see at the bottom of this green, but the hard part's really making it the Pokemon you're getting actually matter when you're picking them, instead of it just being types. That's all I was throwing in.
Yeah, no worries. And so another thing that I was also looking for is with the green bar at the bottom that Pasta just brought up. I know mine is all green, but your bar doesn't have to be all green. It can have red, and you can still have a very successful team. A lot of teams leave an ice weakness because there aren't very many good ice type Pokemon or Pokemon that can use good ice type coverage. It's really only Meowscarada, Bascalibur, Kyurem. Is there anything else that I'm missing? Oh, Weavile.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really if you have an ice weakness, for example, it's not too big of a deal. I think probably the biggest sin with this team is that I have a big water type weakness. I don't have a water type. I think it's not that great, and so my justification for it was, well, if I Terra my Sinistra or my Latias, I'm just gonna plug in Melodic here so you can see what it looks like. Is it gonna load?
Hey.
Yeah, there we go. It still looks good, and I just thought that that was what I was aiming for. That okay, I have a team that's weak to water, but I can always terrestrialize into that water type, and I don't know, that's was my thought process behind leaving that as a weakness. Okay. The other thing that I want to mention really quickly is my speed tiers. So as you'll see throughout the drafts when I show them, not a lot of you did a good job. A good chunk of you are missing a lot of important speed tiers. You really want to be hitting this what I call 120, 110, 100 sort of benchmark, where you have one Pokemon that's 120 plus, one Pokemon that's 110 plus, between 110 and 119, and then one that's around 100 to 110. But I mean, you can even go further than that. I purposely chose a 94, an 85, an 85, a 70, and a 65, just to get that full blend here. Realistically, you only really need the first three, and I know not all of you got that, and so I will mention that. But it is something to look out for, because you want to make sure that you're outspeeding your opponent's Pokemon at all times, and the only way to outspeed your opponent's Pokemon really is to make sure you have Pokemon in a good speed tier.
It's not just being fast, but it's also you have to have spread out speed tiers, so your opponent doesn't just have Let's say if you have your speed tiers go from 100 to 50, then everything in between is not going to run any speed when you face them.
Yeah, they just don't even have to.
Because they don't have to. There's no point. They already outspeed the 50s, and they won't outspeed the 100s anyways.
Yeah.
So they're just going to be more bulky and harder for you to kill.
Yeah. And there's also the concept of revenge killing, which is okay, you need something that's faster than the thing that just killed your thing. in revenge, revenge killing. So always having a mon that's faster than your opponent is huge. Like, sure, you can get kills with the slower guys. It's not, the end of the world, but having something that's dedicated or at least good at revenge killing is always important for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that SunSun and Pasta did a good job explaining that. Last thing I wanted to mention about my team specifically is that I think its volt switch, its pivoting moves, really aren't that great. It's really only U-turn with Sneasler, and I mean Gligar doesn't really count. And so I think that if there was any place that I would want to improve upon this team, it would be getting more U-turn Pokemon and Pokemon that can switch and pivot out and punish that way. But really, it's not a super necessity. It's just something that I personally like to have.
Yeah, pivots
Mhm.
make the game a lot easier for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. It took me a bit to understand why like shit like teleport is nice. It's just like, okay, if I don't know what you're doing in a turn, but I know I can live whatever hit you're gonna throw at me, I can just U-turn or whatever out and see what you're gonna do before I have to do really anything. Like, I don't have to commit to anything, and it's really nice to not have to commit in a game where it's pretty like it's a lot of like predictions and trying to figure out what the other person's gonna do. Like, your best move is always dependent on what the other person is going to do in most situations.
Mm-hmm.
So it is nice to just have like a button that completely negates that necessity.
Okay, and then before we move on to the actual drafts that are in the tour, is there anything else that you want to add? Anything that you guys specifically are looking for in teams?
I think just like having your roles filled is really all, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a couple main things. Like, there's a Smogon analysis you can find online where it's just like it tells you what Pokemon do good at setting hazards, which one breaks other Pokemon. So there's Pokemon called walls, and there's wall breakers. So things that kill the walls. Um, Having setup sweepers, having revenge killers was another role I mentioned earlier. There's all kinds of roles, and trying to fill all of those is really the most important thing with your draft. I I, I probably shouldn't say that, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I'd rather see like a monotype team that has all of the roles filled than having just a ton of random Pokemon with spread out types. And spread out types is also important. Another thing you'll be marked for. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
But something to keep in mind when you draft these teams is like what they are meant to do, what their
Mhm.
purpose is, and how they like help each other.
Yeah.
Right? A few mons could have different purposes depending on what teams they're on, and like if
Hmm.
you can maximize, let's say, Lando T, it can you could might want it for offensive presence, or you might want it for defensive presence on a different team. But it's just how you kind of you know
Yeah.
it's what you build around it that really determines how it's going to be played.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you both said some excellent, wonderful things here. And without further ado, we will be jumping into the drafts. So I don't know if you two had a chance to look over how I ranked them. I think I maybe did a dumb, stupid job, but it's also just my opinion. Um, so coming in at number 10, this is Big Coyotes team. I'm just going to edit that in. Big Coyotes team. And this is a team that I I like, but I don't think it's that good. Like I think I would have a lot of fun using this team, but I think that there's also a lot of problems with this team.
Hmm.
Um, for one, I really like Garchomp and Metagross as a core. I think that that is very good. I think that their speed is certainly maybe I shouldn't jump to speed right away, but there's like the 102 to 70 gap. I think is a little interesting, and I like that they can both set
Who's
rocks and they
80?
both fulfill this nice role. With one of them being your Terra Pokemon, and yeah, I think that Garchomp offers a nice mix-up of being able to set both rocks and spikes, as well as being a very offensive mon that can be like special attacking if you need to, with utility like Dragon Tail to phase the enemy out, while also being offensive with Scale Shot and Earthquake. And I think that this team will succeed when it's being very aggressive and it knows what it's doing and how it's playing. And I think that the core of Garchomp and Metagross really exacerbate that.
Yeah. This team's gonna struggle with like a couple like specific matchups. It's like kind of rough. Like when you face like a decent dark type, like yeah, you can switch Wo-Chien in and that's gonna do whatever it needs to do. But like hitting it super offensively, you got to get that Gardevoir in somehow. Like that's a little tough. There isn't much pivot either. Like you're kind of just like hoping to get that Volt Switch off on Raikou, and if the other people have like a ground type, then you're not moving. You don't have any removal, and like spikes just kind of burn through this team. Especially where you only have one Pokemon that's not being hit by spikes, and you're gonna have to do a lot of switching with this team because it's pretty bulky. Like getting some spikes down is really tough. Like to play against with this team. Now, heavy duty boots, great item, but you're also kind of knock weak. So I don't know how long you'll keep those on. It is a little tough.
I'm just gonna use this team as an example to kind of show how like a team ideally should be thought up of. For example, let's say you have first pick Garchomp. The rest of your game plan and your team should be, how do I support this Garchomp? Right. So Garchomp, what does it not like? What do you need to eliminate for Garchomp to succeed? So usually you want to have other mons that can pressure those mons that can beat the Garchomp. For example, you want mons that can take the ice hits. You want mons that can weaken their, fairy types, flying types, any potential grass types, any mons that can help Garchomp do its job better. You want that, right? Now, going on to this team, I think the biggest flaw is it just doesn't have removal, right?
Yeah.
Without any defog or rapid spin, you don't have ways to get rid of hazards. Uh, so it's a pretty crippling weakness, but I don't think it's the end of the world because I personally actually kind of like this team.
Yeah.
I think it's got some really cool pieces that kind of support each other decently. Garchomp, Metagross are really strong to begin with. I think Terra Raikou is actually pretty good too because it can win games because of how fast it is and how good of a coverage it has with Terra.
And
So
again, to emphasize, I also really do like this team. I think that it just has like a lot of fatal flaws. Like you're never really like you have a Dodrio, but you're never really bringing your Dodrio versus ground types. Like it's not gonna do much. Sure, it's fast and it's got like it doesn't even have good abilities, but sure, it's fast and it's a flying type. But otherwise, you're really weak to ground type. Your Metagross is weak. Your Gengar is weak. Your Raikou's weak, and granted, two of them can Terra, which I think is a good thing, but...
I mean, only one of them is Terraing a week.
Yeah, and so you're still weak to that. There was something else that this team, I didn't like. Oh, it's also really Ghost weak, which I suppose isn't the biggest problem, because you got Garchomp, and no one took Annihilate. So it's not the biggest deal in the world, but having your Wo-Chien also being your only ghost well, I guess Dodrio is a ghost resist, but having Wo-Chien being your only ghost resist is sort of a problem, especially when they can just run coverage. And I think that this team, while it looks very fun, and I think that you'll have a great time using it, I think we'll ultimately end up struggling in a few matchups.
Wait, I forgot Swampert got Flip Turn. That guy's awesome now.
Turn, yeah.
Oh wait, yeah, you got some pivot there too. Sorry. But yeah, no, your Wo-Chien goes, and all of a sudden you have a huge like problem with ground types and ghost types, and that's just tough. Like Lando any Lando really comes in, they U-turn out, Wo-Chien takes 50, then
The
what?
game's over.
Tough.
But yeah, do you guys have anything else that you want to add here?
I don't think so, unless SunSun has something to say.
No, I think just get removal, and then the sync
Yeah.
will be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think one last positive thing. I do like your speed tiers. I think that you need a 120. I think that would greatly help your team, and preferably to get rid of one of these 110s and make one of them like a 120. But otherwise, I think like your speed tiers are really good. You're only really missing 90, which I don't think is the biggest deal in the world. And yeah, I genuinely hope that even though I ranked you last, I hope that you have a fun time with this team because I think like Garchomp, Metagross, Gengar, Wo-Chien, Raikou, like I think they're all good, fun Pokemon that you're going to use. And I think that it's ultimately really good.
I know for the speed spat, you don't need to. You don't need anything too fast. If like you don't need to force speed if it's not gonna work for your team. For a team like this, you could supplement that by wearing force scarves on your mons, because a lot of these mons are really good scarfers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Archomp, Gengar, Gardevoir, Raikou, even Metagross, like they're good with a scarf. So even if you don't outspeed their fast mons, you can, your scarfers will, right? That's not a question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Just one more comment on the speed. Like having it so like earlier SunSun said something about if something, can run more like attacking or more bulk because you don't have the speed. Like they don't have to cover your speed. They don't have to run any speed. That's a bad thing. The 100 speed stat is like the average speed pretty much, and not having something that forces those 100 speed mons to run 100 speed it's a little tough. Some people just joined. If
Yeah,
they
if you'd
want
like to
to,
introduce yourself, we're just on draft 10, the last one, so.
yeah, it's on the prep doc that's posted there in Typer.
Oh.
You want to introduce yourself? You're just gonna come in and say,
What?
"Oh, introduce yourself."
Say hi.
It's a
Hi,
recording.
my name is Jason. Oh, it's a recording.
I'm recording a
dude.
PR video here.
My name's Jason. I like Pokemon Draft League.
Jason's very good.
Yes, he is very good. All right, moving on
Oh,
to
fucking
draft
hell.
number 9. Draft 9 is Dr. Lobster, so let me just add that in. And I really like what you are going for with this team, especially the first two picks, Meowscarada and Baxcalibur. I think that Meowscarada is going to do a really good job at taking the threats that Baxcalibur isn't good at. So that's like water types, and I mean, even to a lesser extent, fairy types. I think that Meowscarada and Baxcalibur really pair well nicely together. And then the rest of your Mons, while I have a few complaints about a few other things, like I enjoy Glimora, and I think that it is a good Pokemon, and that it'll wear down threats for your Baxcalibur and Meowscarada to take care of. Same thing with Garganackle. Garganackle, I also think, will wear down those water and steel types that Baxcalibur has trouble taking on. It's where we get to like the last 4 Mons that I really I don't want to say I start to have a problem with this team, but I think that it starts to struggle a little bit, and uh, it's it's not a problem per se, but it's certainly something that you're going to have issues with as the season goes on. I feel. Um,
Can I give input?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I don't really understand the point of the Indeedee at all. I think that was just a fairy type. It would make this team like a billion times better. Garganackle's ability resists ghosts already, and it's Terra, so you can kind of adapt to any ghost type pretty easily. And then, like, having a fairy would give you so much more counterplay against any dragon type and any dark type, and would be just way better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally, that's it.
Yeah, I think that was good insight. I think another problem with this team is a similar issue that Big Coyotes has, which there's no flying type, and you have Glimora, Garganackle, and Iron Moth, which are all very good Pokemon, and two of them can Terra, but only one can Terra per game. And you're really only going to be bringing your first 6 Mons ever, probably. Indeedee really isn't that great. Mismagius is pretty good, but you're not going to want to bring it over like a Suicune or an Iron Moth. So your team just struggles versus ground types. And granted, you have a Baxcalibur and a Meowscarada, which are great versus ground types. But if it's like a Scarf, or if it's like faster than those Mons, it is just going to click Earthquake, and it is just going to do a chunk of damage to everything on the field.
Okay, this team also you have Mons that really or no, actually no, sorry. I was gonna misspeak. Something that you do struggle with though is that ground type. Just because, okay, sorry, not having a flying type is really hard in probably like most drafts. Just like I know like Mismagius does kind of the job that you want it to do. Like you're resisting ground types and you're resisting fighting types, and that's kind of the job you want your flying type to do anyway. But flying type stab's really valuable a lot of the time, and not having that here is a little scary. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was my interjection.
Mismagius is a good pick. It's just a Mismagius, and it has it's super important role on this team every game, because you just need it.
Yeah,
the ground is going to come all the time because there's 3 Mons weak to it, and
like
only one of the weaknesses can Terra, and there's an Iron Moth.
Yeah.
So like,
and it's like
it's
you have ways
of problem.
Sorry, you have ways of killing the ground type every time. Like that's awesome, but switching into it's really hard. Like switching into Garchomp, like you have to kind of hope that they don't hit a move that isn't EQ when you go into Mismag, and because Meow is just not taking that hit. It's just not bulky enough. Like it can revenge kill after, but that's it.
I mean, if that Garchomp hits Scale Shot, even against the Meowscarada, I mean, it's lights out from there pretty much. Loaded dice. And if it gets a Swords Dance up, I mean, even then, GG. Like, you might as well just FF. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, that's true. Nah, I mean, you're slaying. That's all.
So there's
just too many weaknesses.
There are a few types that are essential for you to draft in draft. So one of them is a ground type, specifically because if you don't have a ground type, every team will just volt switch on you. And even if you have a resistance, they're still leaving the field and bringing something that's good against you. And they'll just keep doing that over and over again. And there are typing, like a few types that are important to have. Flying types, as they mentioned, gives you ground immunity. Steel types and fairy types are nice because of how good of a typing they are, respectively. They both offer you a lot of defensive properties. Resisting fairy, resisting dark, resisting psychic, resisting
dragon,
fighting, dragon, all of that. Steel and fairy are very important to keep the team, together, because you don't always have other mons that can handle these weaknesses.
The other thing that I wanted to mention was I like Garganackle as a Terra. I think it's really good. I think that Garganackle, especially against beginners, will certainly trip up opponents, especially with Salt Cure, if they don't really know what they're doing, and they could get lost. And I think that you can win games just off of Garganackle overperforming. I think that Glimora being a Terra type is ultimately really bad for this team. I think what you want your Glimora for is you want it to lead, you want it with a Focus Sash, You already have a pretty offensive team. Moth puts out a lot of pressure. Excalibur puts out a lot of pressure. Meowscarada puts out a lot of pressure. And I think that having that Glamora Terra and either be forced to stay in the back or be forced to Terra defensively into a Terra flying even, I think ultimately doesn't do your team any good, even if you are winning games with that or whatever. Because this mon should be helping the rest of these mons, and it should also be removing hazards, which it really can't do. In a structure like this, you want to just lead Glamora and win games that way. And that is not going to happen when it is your Terra.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's just kind of that thing where it's like, yeah, sure, your Pokemon can change types, but it's not going to fix the holes. Like the holes are the holes, and that's it. Like there used to be in older gens, you obviously couldn't change types, but there was Pokemon Sil Valley who could be any type, and yeah, it'll fix the hole. But like if there's a hole, 90% of the time, it's only going to be doing that. And like say you didn't have like a dark type on that draft or something, 90% of the time, Sil Valley is going to be the dark type because you need the dark type, and that's it. So trying to make sure you have those types filled in is really important. Yeah.
And just one last thing. I think your Glamora should just be a Terra Iron Moth. I'm pretty sure it fits with the point values. I would need to double check that. But just switch your Glamora to Terra Iron Moth, and your team honestly improves drastically, I would say.
Yeah. Agreed.
Last thing, speed tiers. Of course, I think you do a good job here. 123, 110, 105, 95. I think that is great and perfect, and you did a good job with your speed tiers. Again, we've already spoken about them a lot. How they are important for revenging and outspeeding your opponent, but not super important unless you have all of the utility that you're looking for, which we've already gone over. That you have some good utility, but not great utility. Anything else, or am I good to move on to the next one?
I think this is good.
Okay. Next up, this is Joey's team. This is Joey's team. This team, I think, is.
Oh my gosh!
I got so excited when I saw Rain.
Yeah, awesome. It's interesting. Okay. Ogerpon W is probably the best. It's not the best mon on the draft board. I think the best mon on the draft board is Deoxys Speed, but it is probably the best Terra type. Maybe potentially, I think you can argue Latias, but Wellspring's like 2 or 3 on the whole board, and I think that mon is phenomenal. And the fact that you've paired it with Rain is really demonic. I think you will win games just off having Rain up with Terra Ogerpon clicking Ivy Cudgel. It's a
Trailblaze once and it's over. Just Trailblaze once and it's over.
Yeah. Heck, you can even Swords Dance if your opponent's team is slower and just win off of that without even a Trailblaze. As for the rest of the team, it's good. I like it. I think Iron Bundle's a good mon. I think Landorus is a good mon. I don't really like Pelipper. I know it sets Rain, but I don't really like it as a mon. Blastoise is a fine spinner. I think it's a good spinner on a Rain team. And Jirachi, I think, is a good alternative stealth rocker to Landorus. But I think it's really gonna struggle as part of your team. And then Raichu with a Terra, I think is pretty cool, but ultimately, I don't think you'll ever be Terraing it, because you're going to want to Terra your Ogerpon, and then Sliggoo is just a nothing Pokemon. It might as well just not even be on the team.
These, I like the picks. I think it's kind of hard to go Rain when you have the Landorus, just because now you're getting really fucked by the water types. The mons that I think are the hardest to justify is that Raichu and the Sliggoo. Sliggoo is probably just like whatever. It's like, okay, I'm just picking this because I need to pick something. Yeah, okay, it was a 1-pointer. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Now you do have a point left over, but again, whatever. There's a couple things you probably could change around here. Like I don't think you really super needed like Blastoise and shit.
Well, he definitely needs a spinner.
Yeah, no, for sure, but I think
did it have to be Blastoise? Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I like it because the setup option in Rain is cool.
Right.
But you know, now Bundle Rain, that's badass. That's cool as fuck. That's so sick. I love Bundle Rain. But,
I think the idea behind Landorus is like you see that it has Sandsear Storm accuracy boosted and it's the most powerful ground stab like ever. So you pick it, but I think like you could have just delayed this super hard. Unlike most draft boards, I don't really know how people draft on this board, but you can delay that, and I think if you had and then maybe like gunned for like an Archeludon, this team would be way stronger.
Yeah. Archeludon is like the Rain Steel type right now, just because it has this move called Electro Shot, and that move's really strong. It boosts your special attack, and then hits for like it's like 120 base attack or higher. I don't remember, but it just hits super hard right away. Now, if you do that, you have a couple things you need to fix. Just with that, like even right now, it's a big issue. Is the Ghost and Dark weakness is like okay, yeah, like you have the Rain team, like you can out offense, but it's a little tough. That's all. I think that's all I really had to say.
It's always gonna be like slightly easier to justify huge type weaknesses with Rain, just because of how offensive it is and how fast it can steamroll. There's also no swimmer here.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Barraskewda is still on the board, so there's actually 2 Rain team. Well, it's not really a Rain team. The other guy is using manual Rain.
Oh,
yeah, they didn't want Polytoad, I think.
This is probably less of a Rain team than the other one. I'm not gonna lie.
That is one of the points that I was gonna make when we got to that draft.
wait, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the other one. We'll get
Yeah,
there. Okay.
When you don't have a swimmer, that those huge defensive holes actually become really problematic because you don't have something that just like outspeeds all the opponent's Scarfers.
That means a Swift Swim on, by the way.
Yeah, sorry. Swimmer means something with Swift Swim to just use its ability to negate any speed control and just try to completely run over you.
Yeah. I think like
go.
Sorry. No, don't worry about me.
No worries. I was just going to mention that Barraskewda is actually still on the board. And so I was really confused when they were drafting why they didn't pick up Barraskewda. I figured that would go in the place of their Blastoise. Again, I would need to double check the points on that mon. And also, the speed tier does sort of overlap with Iron Bundle, especially if you put a booster energy on it. I think it's like 135 and Iron Bundle is 136. So like I can sort of see why, but it's also the dominant premier Rainmon for any team, and it just felt silly for me to see you pick Blastoise and then not pick a Swift Swimmer when there was like even the other Rain team doesn't have any Swift Swimmers, I don't think, and so to have all 3 left on the board still, I was just kind of like, wow.
Well,
I think the tragic reality of it is if you were to replace anything for a swimmer, it would probably end up being the bundle or the Ogerpon. Like you do really need spin on Pelipper bundle / Ogerpon Rain. Like it's so important to be able to keep hazards off or at least control them once, crucially in a game. And I mean, all the points are going towards those 2 mons. Like I think that's the only thing that you could really do.
Well, ideally, how you fix a seam is you just take out the Pelipper and you replace it with a mon that could fit the team because Pelipper has no purpose, and if you want to make a real ring team, you would have to replace a lot more pieces. Whereas, if you take out the Pelipper, it's easier.
Hey guys, it wasn't working very well, so I have to stop.
We're doing a stream, bud.
Yeah.
Not stream, a video.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
It's okay.
Pelipper, if you want Ray, that's fine. But you keep the Pelipper. But if you don't want if you just want a good team, you get rid of the Pelipper and like
Yeah.
200 pieces.
And yeah, I think that's it. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that you have good volt switch support. I mean, you don't have you do have volt switch and Raichu, but you have like what is that? Pretty much all your mons get U-turn or flip turn or volt switch, which I think is really good for this team. You're gonna want to be in and out all the time, and I think that is an excellent boon to your team, even if there are some complaints with how it's structured. Anyone else have any last words?
Not really.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. The next draft is 33 Toes' team. It's the Deoxys Speed. So this team,
That bar on the bottom is so funny.
oh my god! I didn't even look at that bar. Yeah, this team certainly exists. I had a really hard time ranking it because you have what is essentially double weather here, with Slowking Galar being the premier snow setter and Ninetales being a sun setter. And there are certain things that this team does really well, mainly beating people. Deoxys speed, I don't think you will ever have an issue outspeeding, outrunning, and beating people with using Deoxys speed. It's probably the best Pokemon on the board, I would say. I really like how fast it is. It's really powerful. It has a ton of good utility and options and moves, and it's just a great Pokemon. Walking Wake as your Terra type in Sun, I think is phenomenal. You will win games just off people not bringing a Water type or a Water Terra. You will click Choice Specs Hydro Steam and you will win the game. Even Pokemon like Scovillain, I think, can win and can sweep games if they aren't expecting it. And then we get to your other Pokemon. You have Slowking Galar, which, like, it's good. It's a good defensive Pokemon, but it goes against your Sun. You're drafting it for like a pivot, and it just doesn't want to pivot because it gets rid of your Sun. And then you have Ting Lu, which is a good Pokemon, but it doesn't work on a Sun team. And it doesn't work with your Slowking Galar because you already have like a good defensive backbone. So you now have a Sun team, which I think could be really good with Deoxys Speed, that has two walls that just slow the team down to a grinding halt. Not even mentioning Screamtail, which is another defensive Sun type Pokemon, and then like Leafeon doesn't exist. And this team is it'll win games. It'll probably win way more games than it should. But it just goes against what the team wants to do.
I think we're gonna see a lot of eject button Slowking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like a lot of it, like almost like every game. the insane part about this team, which I don't think like the first time ever saying this team is insanely bug weak, and them clicking U-turn, which isn't really great for you because that means that they're keeping the momentum versus your offensive like steal the game fast team. It's gonna be hard to get it back because you don't have any switch-ins to U-turn, which is funny as hell.
It's a little tough. It is hard because, like, yeah, you have these passive pieces. They're not even passive. Like, Tinglu and Glowking can still have their way, but it's like they're not built for like this almost. It's not hyper offense. It's weather specific, but like they're going to come in and they're going to sit when you don't really want that almost ever. Like you want to get the fucking Walking Wake in as often as possible. But again, your pivot makes it hard for that walking wake to come in because it's going to set the snow instead of just letting it come in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I love Leafeon. Leafeon weather is awesome. I'm going to be honest. I think that's cool. But again, it's not going to really do much. That Scoville and shit isn't doing.
It's not gonna. Your Leafeon is not gonna win you games. It's cool. It'll definitely give you style points. It is not gonna win you games. As someone just pointed out in the chat, TJ, this team is also very hazards weak as well, which is kind of not. I don't want to say surprising, because there is no flying type, so it means you're not taking super effective damage from Stealth Rocks, not super effective, 25, 50. But Deoxys Speed doesn't want to run Boots. It wants to run Life Orb or Focus Sash. Slowking Galar kind of wants to run Boots. Ninetales doesn't want to run Boots. It wants to run Heat Rock, and neither does Walking Wake. Walking Wake wants Specs. Ting Lu could run Boots, I guess, if you're building a hard stall team, but it doesn't really want Boots. It wants Leftovers or Eject Button or Red Card. A Screamtail could run Boots, but more often than not, you want to run a Rocky Helmet on this thing. And then Leafeon and Scoville just want attack boosting. Expert Belt, Life Orb, Choice Band, Choice Specs. And it also...
I don't think Screamtail nor Scoville really mind that much to run Boots, but the point still stands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the other problem is that you don't have a rapid spinner. So I don't want to say rule of thumb here, but my general opinion is that you should not be building a Sun team without Great Tusk. I think Great Tusk is mandatory on Sun teams this generation. It's really good at rapid spinning. It's really good at abusing it, whether it's plus speed or plus attack nature. You can even be plus defense with body press. And I just don't think that if you're running a Sun team, you need those two bonds together, like a Sunsetter and Great Tusk. I don't think you can have a successful team without it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think weather is cool and fun. I think you'll have cool moments and fun, but this team is pretty weak. I play a lot of a different format. It's called Little Cup, and they're all little, and Sun's really good in that, and a lot of the Sun teams end up looking like this. But the virtue of not playing Little Cup is that you have a lot more Mons, a lot more Pokemon at your disposal. So there's other pieces you can fit on this that will make this team a lot more functional, a lot more fun, and it's I don't know, you're a little less scary. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have anything to say? It's okay if you haven't even spoken before. Don't worry, you're good.
I don't have much that in terms of fixing the team. I think it's going to be really hard to fix and actually make it perfect. But explore eject button looking.
That'd be cool. Yeah,
that is very cool.
I think that's going to be a very powerful tool for you, so that you don't have to either give up momentum or remove your own weather. It'll at least be a one-time thing to hopefully get you a mon advantage and then steamroll the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think with that, your speed tiers, we didn't mention that, but I think your speed tiers are all fine. You also have Sun Abusers in Walking Wake, which can boost speed, and that's nothing you should really worry about. But I figured I should mention it since I mentioned it for everyone else so far. And with all that said, let's move on to draft number 6. Draft number 6 is very funny. Sorry, let me just make sure I'm pronouncing their name correctly. It is Sanjid. I hope that is how you pronounce it.
These drafts are crazy.
This team, I think, I was kind of hating on it at first when I was building this. I think I don't think it's great. I think it has a lot of noob killers on it. I think Bellydroma Azumarill, especially with Terra, is always going to do well versus players who have never played this game before. Darkrai, I think, is a very good, very fast Pokemon that will catch people off guard. Volcarona will Quiver Dance once, and it will sweep opposing teams. Mew, I think, can do anything, and if you're willing to build around that, it is really good, and I think that it'll also win you games. Same thing with Umbreon with Wish Passing, so that you're able to get the Volcarona back up, the Azumarill after it Belly Drums back up, the Darkrai back up. I think that this team will beat out a lot of people who haven't really played before and don't really know what they're doing and don't really know what they're looking for, even if by most standards it isn't exactly the best team on the board.
Two insane weaknesses of this team. One of them, SunSun mentioned before, but you really want to look for a ground type when you draft. This team doesn't have one, and it also has a Skarmory and an Azumarill on it. Volt Switch is going to be a huge problem. It's very telegraphed that you're probably going to end up going into one of Umbreon or Goodra on those, and they can design a game plan around it pretty easily. Another one is you have Skarmory and Volcarona, and your only fire resist is the Terra Azumarill. And while that short term can handle it, it also kind of takes away from its offense, and it's not long term very secure. Fire types look like they're definitely going to steamroll through your team if you don't get your offense going fast enough.
Yeah, I most certainly agree with everything that you said there. Another thing that I also really like about this team is I really like having Skarmory. I think Skarmory on this team really does a lot for it. It's a nice Pokemon with Sturdy. It can set Stealth Rocks. It can set Spikes. And I think that really helps Pokemon like the Azumarill and the Darkrai, which really like mons to be chipped and to be less healthy when they enter the field, especially if your opponent has, like, let's say, a 33 Toes team, which is very weak to, like, rocks and spikes. And so being able to set those up near immediately and then going into Azumarill and clicking Belly Drum and Liquidation and Aqua Jet and just winning the game. And the same can, of course, be said about Darkrai and Volcarona. And that being said, yeah, I guess I don't really have much else to say about this team. I really don't like your U-turn and your Volt Switch options. Your U-turners are Volcarona and Jumpluff and Mew. Mew also gets Volt Switch. These, I mean, maybe Jumpluff is clicking U-turn. Volcarona is never clicking U-turn. Mew is almost never clicking Volt Switch or U-turn. You just have little pivoting options, and Goodra Hisui helps with that, where it can just tank hits with its absurdly high base stat total, but it can't really heal back. I mean, you can put on leftovers, but it's not really doing anything else beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, if this Goodra was a ground type, world the difference, I think. But yeah, I agree with this. The Skarmory can bring some good stuff to the table, and for what it's worth, I don't think it's like that great in the meta of this generation, but for what it's worth, Skarmory plus Umbreon is a very tough nut to crack, especially for newer players. And because of that, the fire and electric weakness just kind of stifles that opportunity for Skarmory to thrive. Because it's really just drawing in all the best offense from your opponent.
Yeah, I truthfully don't really know what else I want to say about this team. I don't really have much else to say. I mean, I think you did good with your speed tiers. I think you did good with pretty much everything else besides what we mentioned. And I think that you will win a good chunk of your games, and I think you will have fun with this team, even if it's maybe not structurally the best. I think it's nice and fun, and it's fine.
Yeah, I think
for them.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's cool. You're gonna outlast your opponent every fucking time. That's a good thing.
And yeah, let's move on to draft number 5, which is Mika's electric terrain team.
Oh, yo, this is sick.
Which I think is very sick, except it doesn't have like Iron Moth, and it relies on Pinjurin. So it sort of struggles in the offense department a little bit here, I think. You have Iron Valiant, which is a phenomenal Pokemon. Just no qualms with it. I think it's one of the best Pokemon of the newest generation. Really great. You also have Iron Treads, which is a great Mon. And it can do a lot for your team, and I think it really fits and it really works. And then you have the rest of your Pokemon. Rotom Wash is very good, but it's an electric type that isn't boosted by your terrain, which is, I mean, sure, it's also a Rotom Wash, but, kind of want a little bit more. Dragonite as pick 2 without Terra, I think, doesn't do a ton for your team, but it's also a Dragonite with multi-scale that will Dragon Dance and it'll win games. Iron Leaves is also one of your Terramons, and Grass Psychic isn't a great type, but it's boosted by the electric terrain, and it does some good things. And the fact that you can defensively Terastallize out of it, I think, is very positive for this team uh, in a way that I think is very interesting and something that I haven't really thought of. But then you have Hisuian Arcanine and Bisharp to round out the core, and I really don't see what these two mons kind of do. Like I sort of get it. You have like a permanent steel and a good dark type in Bisharp, and Arcanine is a good Intimidate user. It can Will-O-Wisp. It has fast, strong priority and Rockhead, and can click Choice Banded. Head Smash and Flare Blitz, and kill a lot of Pokemon. But when I've used it in the past, I found it to be very underwhelming, and I think that as the season progresses, you will also find the same thing with your Bisharp and your Arcanine.
I actually am kind of okay with those picks. Arcanine, I think it's honestly pretty valuable to have here because it's kind of just like a bunch of things joined together. Like right now, I think the biggest issue is that Iron Valiant is very locked into special attacking roles like every single week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably going to mean that its fighting stab isn't going to be as useful, right? So it's going to be harder generally, I think, to crack through steals, at least effectively enough, because Treads is not really always the best offensive piece. It is Terra, which is kind of something I don't really like, but that's beside the point. Arcanine can definitely help with cracking through steals and punishing them for being out, which
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that a lot. It's also just another offensive piece that they have to prep for, so it's kind of fine by me. And then Bisharp it fills the dark type role. Sometimes with Iron Treads, you kind of feel like you want an extra steal just because you don't have it resisting ice. That's not entirely the same thing this time around because you have Arcanine Hisui. But I don't think it's the worst pick either. It's still a decently valuable low tier.
Mm-hmm.
I
But yeah,
can, I can like this team
for right
a lot.
now, my biggest gripe with it is the Terra Iron Treads and the lack of special attackers.
Yeah, I was going to mention about the Terra Iron Tread. I really don't like that. I can't think of in my mind a situation where you'd want to either defensively Terra your Iron Treads or offensively Terra it. It feels sort of weird, and that you kind of want another Mon there. I think you really want an Iron Moth that'll just sit there and can Terra and can be like, ooh, I'm boosting my speed and my special attack with a Choice Specs item and electric terrain. and the team doesn't exactly have that. When I used Electric Terrain in Nat decks, I found that Iron Treads was just best used as like a spinner that can be like offensive in a pinch in terrain. So I would run like I'd run like plus attack nature with maybe a little bit of speed to outrun some things and a lot of HP and defense, so I can absorb hits, and then my terrain boost is plus attack, and so it'll do more than if it didn't have that terrain. And that's kind of how you want to be building this. Like the Iron Valiant, for example, is always going to be in terrain special attack boosting, as Wagon said, or speed boosting. And so then you use your item like a choice band or a choice specs or a choice scarf to boost it the other way. So you get essentially both boosts at a time, and you're going to want to apply sort of the same principle to the Iron Leaves and to the Iron Treads.
I like this team. I think it looks fun.
It does look really fun.
Replace Bishop with something else, and it'll be a lot better.
Just a different dark type, and you're kind of chilling.
But otherwise, I think, dude, I don't mind this team. I think it'll be fine.
I think Electric Terrain is just kind of lame. Like I feel like they're just gonna bring like a real boom or I guess there isn't really many other setters or Indeedee because that got drafted. And they're just gonna lose their terrain often, and I just don't see it working. But there's also like no defog, and then you have to run like Ice Spinner.
How expensive was the Pincurchin?
The Pincurchin was 3 points.
Okay, so like the reason I don't think that it's so bad that it's like an quote unquote electric terrain team is all the abusers are just really just benefiting off of Cork Drive. So if you don't want to bring the Pincurchin, you just bring Booster Energy if you really want that. And there's like all the terrain abusers, other than specific like ability guys, are are they can work outside of terrain just naturally because Cork Drive is a broken ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an apt way to put it. The other last things to mention, speed tiers are good. I think they work out nice. Iron Valiant, great speed tier, 2 above 100. You're mostly going to be in electric terrain a lot of the time, and your Dragonite is going to be Dragon Dancing. So I think you're good there. And then you're pivoting with Volt Switch is there, but you don't have any U-turn mons, which I think is not the best thing in the world, but you do have some pivot to get your very good Cork Drive boosting mons in the terrain. So ultimately not that bad. And I think that you will see a lot of success with this team, even if I do have some issues with it. But it is still very good. Anything else? Have anything to say?
I'm good.
Okay. We will move on to Draft 4, which is the manual rain team. It's BassyXX.
Here's where the Arcalion went.
Yeah.
Okay, pick 2. I see why the other team didn't get it now.
BassyXX. So this team, I think, is really interesting. I really like the choice to terastallize the Lando and the Archelodon. I think that they're both really good, kind of decently underrated Terramons. I think that there's a lot that you can do with them. I think that they're very good, and I think that the rest of the Mons on your team complement them nicely. I really like King Gambit being another Steel type, a Steel Dark type that can kind of punch its way through teams late game, which is something that this team kind of maybe not desperately needs, but it needs a lot of initial power, and you don't get it. You don't get King Gambit's power initially, but you will get King Gambit's power eventually, and it will win you games sometime. And then there's Manaphy, which Take Heart and Soul, I don't care.
Take Heart? You talking about that?
Yeah, Take Heart, and then what's the other one that boosts X3? Tail Glow. There we go.
Yeah.
Tail Glow will just win you games, and it'll be really good. Hydrapple, I think, is Yeah, you know what? I like Hydrapple. I think Hydrapple is pretty good. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but with Regenerator and Sticky Hold, I think it's ultimately a good mon, if kind of middling, and I think that it'll do a fine job on this team. Galvantula, I think, works really well with your like pseudo manual rain with Compound Eyes Thunder. Works really well. Being able to set up sticky webs so that your admittedly kind of slow team can speed up a little bit. And then Weezing Galar is just a great defensive Pokemon that can do a lot. Poison Fairy, I think, is a great typing. And then Daxbun, I think is how you pronounce it. It's just a nice little low tier fairy type. It's pretty good. No real complaints with that pick.
Yeah. I definitely like the webs into this. I mean, I see this honestly more as a webs team than it is like a manual rain team, even though I do see it. But like it's very nice, especially like King Gambit is something that's really insane on webs. But generally, while webs do help with the speed, it's of course not going to be the most guaranteed way of speed control, and just being this slow is going to be pretty tough. The priority is mainly just King Gambit. There's a couple weak sucker punchers, but that's about it. So what this all kind of leads to for me is this team looks like it's going to get totally destroyed by fast fairies.
Yeah.
There's not really much counterplay to it's like a Specs Moonblast from anything faster than Lando. Really, like it's pretty tough, and even more sad nail in the coffin is the only Pokemon with knockoff on this team. Like to just take off some boots is Manaphy, which wants to be running the Tail Glow or the Take Heart.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like webs are good. There's definitely counterplay. And if they find it, you're gonna have a tough time versus some of the fast special attackers.
Um. Yeah, I think that ultimately this team does a lot of really good things. I think that our Chaladon is really good. Just end of sentence.
Yeah.
And I I think that it'll a lot of times just win you games, especially versus newer players, especially since there's a lot of weather going around. I'm sure you've seen with like Toes and Joey and even Mika. I know it's an electric terrain team, but it functions the same way as weather. And I I think that this team it'll do good and it'll win games so long as you can get your webs up and keep them on the field, and then use your very powerful Landorus, Archelodon, Manaphy, and King Gambit. Um, I don't really see this team having a ton of like weaknesses or problems. Again, the bar is all green. It's very good. You have a ground type. You have ground immunities. You have
Yeah,
ghost.
honestly, like the only like big exploitable weakness, you could maybe argue Ghost, but the only real big one is just taking a Moonblast is tough. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, other than that, resistances being covered is definitely very good, and it gives you kind of a way to win in basically any matchup with good preparation. Yep.
Okay. Next up we have sorry, this is Avium's team. Avium. And Avium's
Ooh,
team, I think, is
this is kind of cute. Little Suncore.
it's another weather team. I forgot that we had another Sun team. Um, This team, I think, is definitely a much better Sun team than the last one that we saw. I think that Roaring Moon is very good into this. I think Slitherwing is very good on Sun teams. Venusaur, I think, is really good. You have Rabombi to set webs. You have Gliscor to set rocks and toxic spikes. You have Goldengo to block those spins. But the problem is individually they're all good, but I don't think it really like super works together, if that makes sense. Like I so Alamomola is on the team and it's a bulky water type, but it's not doing a ton in Sun. It's really just coming in and absorbing a hit and then flip turning out. And it granted it's Alamomola, it's not gonna win you games, but it's not helping your team because you want the Sun to be up and out at all times. And the Alma Mamola is stopping your Sun abusers from being Sun abusers. And then you also have your Goldengo, which granted can Terra, and I think that that's really good, and it helps the fact that it is a Steel type on a Weather team, on a Sun team specifically. But when you're on a Sun team, oftentimes your opponents are also going to be bringing those really powerful Fire and Ground type moves, which doesn't really super synergize well. And it synergizes well with the Roaring Moon and the Gliscor, but it doesn't synergize with what the goal of the team is. And then sort of like with the Gliscor, I have the same complaints where it's a flying type, it sets rocks and spikes, and it does annoying Gliscor things. It'll toxic heal and it'll swords dance and facade you to death. But it's also like just a Gliscor that wants to click protect and heal with toxic heal, and you're losing valuable Sun turns. And it's very good. Like your Venusaur wants to be in the Sun, your Roaring Moon wants to be in the Sun, your Slitherwing wants to be in the Sun, but the rest of your team, while it helps your team with like support aspects, they don't really want to be in the Sun. Do you have anything else to say, Wagon?
Yeah. Honestly, like this just seems kind of like two different, very polarizing modes where it's just like Roaring Moon knockoff spam hazard stack, with Almola just kind of being a pivot for positioning. I don't honestly think Almola is that bad. And then there's the Sun Core, of course, which Almola maybe can be annoying to make work, but at the same time it is a slow pivot. So if you have enough turns of Sun, you can still make use out of the Sun with Almola on your team. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think a lot, like basically the main problems with this team are going to be the complete reliance on Goldengo's base typing to be the sole resistance to a few things, like the combination of psychic and fighting. It's only handled by Goldengo. It's the only flying resistance. It's the only rock resistance, um, and that's going to be pretty important. So it terraing, while I don't take it being a Terra captain away from that resistance, I do take it away from its potential to Terra. It's going to kind of leave you without counterplay to certain stuff. So I think this Goldengo's might end up getting locked into Terra Steel a lot of the time. But it's like it's whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like you're forced to Terra, so like you still can, but you can still manage. But it has some weaknesses. I honestly don't really mind the two different modes, and I don't think they clash like super hard. I do think the Rabombi is kind of, other than just being a fairy type, I don't really think it's very useful, in all honesty, for either of these game plans.
Well, I think it sets webs, and then Goldango's like, "Nope, you're not removing these webs anymore." And like that's
Yeah,
the idea. It's sort of just like a 1-2. Up, I have webs up. Look at you. You have webs down. You can't run as fast. I can. Haha. And so
yeah.
like in that sense it works, but I agree.
It is definitely like a tool that you can use. Webs. I mean, with Goldango, it does help. It can maybe help the Moon. It can maybe help the Slitherwing. If it's like a banded Terra Slitherwing, that can be cool. But it's just the webs just kind of aren't that useful for this team, as opposed to just leaning into weather or leaning into hazard stack. Like, I don't think Rabombi's gonna really want to find its way onto a lot of these teams. And if it was just a more general fairy type that could support in more straightforward ways, it would be easier to use at least.
Yes,
I think maybe the coolest use for Rabambi is just being like a Spexmon, just like Specs Moonblast Spam, just next to hazards, just chipping away at everything.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. The other thing that I want to mention is that your flying weakness is pretty bad. Granted, your Slitherwing Cantera, which is a 4x weakness, but that won't fix your Venusaur or your Rabambi. And granted, like, people aren't going to be like spamming hurricanes into you. And now that I think about it, Tornadus wasn't taken, so you're not going to have to worry about like Bleak Wind Storm. But you're still gonna have to worry about just like Brave Bird and like Air Cutter, physical flying types, and it's very good, but it also has a lot of holes and a lot of weaknesses. You can also see that like the Slitherwing Venusaur Rabambi is also like weak to fire at the back half of your draft. And sure, you have a Torkoal and an Alma, but let's say one of them goes down. I mean, they're clicking Sun boosted Choice Banded Flare Blitz, and there's almost nothing this team can do. And yeah, I think that ultimately you did do a good job team building, and I like the hazard stacking portion of it, and I like the Sun portion of it. And I know Wagon says that they go really well together, but
I'm not saying they go really well together. I'm just saying I don't think they clash as much as you said.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And then the
But
only
yeah,
other thing. Go.
I agree. Like the Slitherwing, like yeah, it's Terra, so it's gonna not be like a big liability when it comes to like being a flying weakness once it Terras. But that's also going to start making stuff more predictable, right? Because the Goldengo kind of can't Terra. Its defensive typing is so important. And the Slitherwing needs to Terra, so then they can start planning around that in the builder, and it becomes more straightforward what to do, you know?
And yeah, I think the only other thing to mention is that your speed tiers are all fine. Again, it's a Sun team. Your Roaring Moon's going to be faster. Your Slitherwing's going to be faster. Your Venusaur is going to be faster. And you also hit that 120, 119. You don't have 100, but that's fine. And the rest of them are fine. And then you have a lot of good pivot options. Your Rabambi is never going to really be pivoting, but your Roaring Moon loves to pivot. Your Slitherwing loves to pivot, and Goldengo certainly can pivot. It certainly isn't a bad thing when it does. And so I think that ultimately you do have a pretty good team here, even if there are some things that I don't love about it. And going on to draft number 2, I have it. This is Skittles Draft. This is the Great Tusk Greninja team. This team, I really, I like. You know what? I really like this draft. I think it's in my eyes in contention to being the best draft on the board. I think Great Tusk is a phenomenal Pokemon. It can do anything your heart desires. It can set rocks, spin, offensive, defensive. Gloomon. It literally so phenomenal, amazing good. And then there's also Greninja attached to it, which is also another phenomenal, amazing mon with Battle Bond and Protean and a vast move pool and options to choose from at all times. It can Swords Dance and be physical. It can be special with priority and Water Shoryuken. And I think it pairs really well with like Heatran as well, and your Salamence, which can also Terra in the back. And there's a few things that I would like to add that I don't super love. I don't love Ditto just as a Pokemon and on the team. I don't think it will ever really add much, and I don't think it'll ever really do much. But I don't think it's bad per
Hold
se.
on.
It's good versus beginners.
I just
And,
want to say it's not Terra Grunt, it's Terra Heat.
mhm.
Terra
Yeah.
Heatran, you said?
Yeah, as Terra Heatran.
Oh yeah, you have Terra Greninja in the thing.
Wait, is it Terahedron?
Yeah.
Oh my god, wait.
Yeah. I was
Oh my
thinking
god, it is
Brandon
Terahedron.
Mans wouldn't be legal as a Pokemon.
I just assumed that it was Terra Greninja because I thought Greninja was really good. Yeah. Sorry about that. And then I think that like ultimately like your Dusclops and your Ditto really aren't doing much for this team. But I don't think that that's particularly bad, and I don't think that they're particularly bad Pokemon either. And I think that they're fine additions, even if they don't particularly add much. And then the only other mon that we haven't really just touched on briefly here is the Ninetales. I think it hits a good speed tier that this mon needs, and it gives you that nice fairy typing. But ultimately, there's no real like hail abusers. There's no like Titan or anything like that. So you're really just kind of drafting it to either set Veil or like spam Moonblast and Freeze Dry and Blizzard, which isn't a bad thing. In fact, it's probably one of the better use cases of weather this draft board has seen. But in a draft, a draft board dominated with so many weather teams, it just sort of falls flat in that aspect, I think, a little bit. And also, Rotom isn't a mon that I'm particularly huge on. I think it's pretty good. It can pivot, but it ultimately isn't the greatest Pokemon this generation, I don't think. And if there's anything else that you guys would like to add, please feel free to go ahead.
I think Terra Heatran's like it's okay, but like Terra Mans is like the star of the show here. But it
Yeah.
can actually put in a lot of work. Ninetales, it doesn't really make sense on this team. However, if you got it just to play the weather war, props to you because this might actually like screw over a lot of other people's plans. They take out the Torkoal, or like Ninetales or like their Pelipper, and then you just set up your own weather and just override it. Could actually come into play. But yeah, Grant's good. Like Great Tuck is good. I think top four of this team is really good.
Yeah.
It's just when you
They're
evaluate the
pretty
bottom
insane.
four,
Yeah.
it's like a bit lackluster.
Yeah.
They don't really have much of a
Hilariously, I
focus.
think that this team is like kind of really good in this little metagame that they've made, with like really good counterplay to both Rain and Sun, with
And the
great
Ditto
great touch
too.
and Greninja plus freeze dry. It's like it's pretty sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really cool things going on with this team that are sort of like happening in the background, if that makes sense. And I think it really does play to the meta that this draft is currently in. And I think that you will see a lot of success with this team if you're able to pull it off and use it very successfully.
Yeah, I do think that Ditto might be uniquely pretty bad. I mean, maybe some of the non-Terra weather sweepers might fold to the Ditto, but generally, like two of these mons on this 8-mon team are gonna be Terra, and Terra Caps have a really easy time playing around Ditto because they can use this funky move called Terra Blast, and when they're Terra, they get an actual move, and when Ditto copies them, it just gets this normal 80 base power, pretty useless move instead, and they can kind of design their set around Ditto and just absolutely bodying the rest of the team, and then Ditto's just useless, Um, when two of these Terra Caps have the ability to do this, it kind of ruins Ditto's potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um. What else is there to mention? Your weaknesses. You have a weakness to Fairy, just looking at the bar at the bottom, which I don't think is all that bad with Heatran. It's sort of like a little like Iron Valiant weak, I would say, Where like, yeah, you resist their Moonblast, but then you're gonna get hit with a close combat, and your Heatran is gonna drop, and then suddenly Specs Moonblast just goes crazy. And you also have a like a fighting weakness as well, which is sort of helped with your Dusclops. But your Ninetales doesn't really want to be eating a lot of fighting type moves, and then same with your Salamence, which is your other resist. It even if it didn't Terra, it doesn't really want to be eating those fighting moves, and then it does Terra into like let's say a Terra Water for example. It's just going to be eating them even harder, and it's not even going to be a resist anymore. And like, granted, your Great Tusk can probably shrug off a close combat once or twice, but it can't do that the whole game. And so I think that the team will struggle versus like an Iron Valiant, as I was saying, where it'll just click either Choice Band in close combat or Choice Specs Moonblast, and you don't have a counterplay. You don't have a counterplay to both of them at the same time.
Yeah, the play with this team might actually have to be pretty precise, and the sequence might have to be really solid. But it does have the potential to really beat most things, which is kind of all you can ask for, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
This might have a similar issue with the Goldengo on the other team, where the Heatran's type is just so essential that timing a Terra with it is just going to be difficult. So it's really just going to be the men's show, which is fine, but it's just kind of like wasted points, you know?
Yeah. The only other thing that I have left to add is I really like your speed tiers. The 122, 109 Ninetales really isn't that great. You kind of want that 110, and it's also a Ninetales, so it isn't even really that great to begin with. But it works and it's serviceable. Salamence hits 105, and then the rest of your draft is kind of slow. But like Ditto is going to be a different mon all the time. And Great Tusk can certainly use photosynthesis to boost up its speed. So it's not really all that big of a deal. And ultimately, I don't think that you're going to have an issue with it. The only other thing would be your Volturn core with Greninja being the only U-turner and Rotom-Mow being the only Volt switcher. I think is kind of bad, but again, your team is decently defensive with Great Tusk being able to hit physical and with being able to eat physical attacks, and Heatran being able to hit special attacks. You also have Veil up a good chunk of the time, hopefully, probably. So eating hits will be even easier for the mons that don't really want to take those hits. And I think that you have a really good team and a really solid team. I think you'll do well, and I think you'll have a lot of fun here.
Yep.
And then with that, we move on to what I think is the best team on the board. This is Santa's team. It's the Palafin Zapdos team.
Oh man.
Let me just. Oh, that's me. I can't even rename it. That's fine.
Yeah, this team is pretty sick.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm just gonna come out and say my one. Well, I guess it's technically two negatives. I don't like the Excadrill with the Rillaboom, weakening your ground type attacks. Yeah, and then that's pretty much it. And then I don't like your Tyranitar terastallizing and getting out of its rock type, which it really wants to keep the Sand Spadef boost. But other than that, I have like almost no complaints with this team. I think it is really freaking good. Palafin has wonderful priority moves, great setup, great attack, great special attack. It'll eat hits. It'll just win you games with Jet Punch after a bulk up. In fact, you probably don't even need a bulk up and can just run Choice Band and click Jet Punch and win practically every game. Zapdos, I think, is great. Static, it'll be able to break those bulky waters that Palafin can't break, and it's a great defensive mon. I really like Zapdos on sand, personally. I think it's really good on sand teams that are typically weak to fighting types that it can just eat and punish and be really good with. And then there's Rillaboom. which is grassy terrain, gives healing to Palafin, again, breaks those bulky waters that it otherwise struggles with. It can set up, it can be choice banded and click Woodhammer and deal a ton of damage, knock off, U-turn, just phenomenal utility mon, really works well with this team. And then you get into the Sand Abusers with Tyranitar and Excadrill. Again, two phenomenal Pokemon. Excadrill spinning, Tyranitar often going to want to be either, Smooth Rock, extending the weather, or even just like a choice band and just tearing through teams. Excadrill will always be there in the back. It can Mold Breaker. The only real issue with that is that it's the only two Stealth Rockers on the team, and neither of them really wants to run rocks. And you also have no spikes, but that's not really a problem when you have a Palafin, which will tear through teams, and a Zapdos, which is really good defensively, and Rillaboom, and I can keep talking about all those mons again, because they're just so phenomenal, amazingly good, and I think they work really well here. And then rounding out the team with Skeledirge, I think works great as unaware Pokemon. It's a great Terra Captain. I think you'll be using it a lot, and you'll have a lot of success with it. And I really do not foresee any, if many, problems with this team. I just think that it is all around great. Virizion is kind of a nothing mon. It just sort of exists to be the fastest Pokemon on your team. And Golduck doesn't really do anything either. But your first six of Palafin, Zapdos, Rillaboom, Tyranitar, Excadrill, and Skeledirge, I think is just the best six that we've seen all day here. Wagon, if you have anything you want to add?
Yeah. So of course the speed is obviously probably one of the biggest issues on this team. Virizion doesn't really want to be coming to basically any game because it's just Rillaboom's going to be better in most cases.
Yeah.
And Golduck literally is never coming to a game. Like unless specifically the rain matchup and you need it. But you also have Palafin, Zapdos, Rillaboom, so I'm not super sure if that was really even necessary. I honestly disagree. I think the Tyranitar is kind of decent as a Terracap, and also it doesn't really mind clicking rocks. Like I think it's kind of okay. I think one of the biggest problems is these Terracaps are basically going to be locked into Terra Fairy all the time. Drill is not very secure answer to Dragon types, which are going to be a pretty huge problem for the Fire, Water, Grass plus Zapdos. Taking them down isn't going to be that easy, and taking a hit is going to be way harder without a Terra Fairy. It's versus any team with a good dragon, it's going to be like locked Terra Fairy every single time. I don't really see a way around that at all.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point. That I did kind of miss that. Yeah, you know what? The more that I think about that, the more I think you're actually really right. Even though you do technically have that one dragon resist, you are really weak to dragon otherwise. And granted, Palafin can run like Ice Punch and Ice Beam if you're special, but I mean that's really it. And yeah, wow.
For me personally, I'm not sure which I like more between Team 1 and Team 2. So it's a tough decision, and I'm okay with this one being the number one. But there are some holes that are hard to fix. I think maybe the best way of doing it is to just reconsider those last two, and if you can find speed on the board, go for it. Like a 110 would honestly be so much better than a Virizion that's never going to come to a game.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Finding a 110 would be phenomenal here. Your speed is really lacking, and I think that's sort of like a Palafin problem, where if you draft Palafin, you kind of like need Zapdos to break the water types, and you kind of need Rillaboom to break it, and they're both really just kind of slow, and then you sort of struggle, And granted, you have Excadrill to run and outspeed things, which I think is really good. And very interesting and a good way to solve that problem. But you have so many rain teams and so many sun teams that it's going to not be boosting as often as you think it is going to be speed boosted, and it's ultimately going to end up struggling versus like the rain team, for example, which again you have Palafin, Zapdos, and Rillaboom for, plus a Skeletor which can Terra.
Oops.
What was that?
I think I just disconnected and reconnected.
No worries, you're all fine. But it isn't going to be winning those games versus those teams. Your Excadrill. So, yeah, I mean, I think your bottom bar is pretty good. Ice weakness is fine. Fighting weakness, I think, is fine. Again, you're likely going to need to be doing that Terra Fairy that Wagon mentioned, so that you can take more fighting hits. Because even though your Skeledirge is immune, giving your Tyranitar that Terra Fairy would definitely help patch up that hole a little bit. And you also do have a Zapdos.
Well, it's mainly the dragons that's for.
Yeah.
That this team otherwise doesn't have much counterplay for.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I think that's really much it. You have a good Volturn core with Zapdos and Rillaboom, and I don't really have that much else to add here. Do you have anything else to say?
No, that's it.
Okay. And then is there anything else that you would like to say and add on the draft as a whole, or any mons that you think people should consider taking up that you just immediately jump out to you on the board?
I actually haven't looked at the board at all.
Yeah, that's fine. The only thing that really
So
stuck
not
out to
really.
me was like Raging Bolt didn't get picked, which I think would be really good on one of the rain teams.
That is crazy. Raging Bolt would do insanely well in this metagame.
Yeah.
It gets access to Weather Ball, which honestly could be really useful, and then of course Photosynthesis and being good against rain as well as on rain. Like that seems like a really meta pick in this landscape, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
If
was
you
really
could
the one mom
redesign
that I
your
wanted
team
to
around
highlight
the
too, for literally exactly the same thing, stole the words out of my mouth. And yeah, I think that ultimately all of you guys have very good drafts that are very usable, and you will most certainly have fun here. Even though I ranked some of you pretty low and I was pretty critical of some drafts here, I think that ultimately they're all very good and you will win games using all of these teams. And yeah, all I can really hope for at this point is that you have a wonderful and fun season here. I hope you enjoy it. Um, and yeah, I think that's it. Any final words, Wagon, SunSun, Pasta?
Play Octopath Traveler.
And yeah,
nice man.
Yeah, if you ever have any questions, there's a whole boatload of draft communities you can ask questions to. Even if it's just like FAs, there's usually somewhere you can ask people or happy themselves or DM PastaSupper on Discord. I don't.
And yeah, thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have fun. Thanks again, of course, to Pasta, SunSun, and WagonFruit. And there were a few other people who joined who are no longer here, but that is all right. They did this of their own free time and their own free will. And thank you again so much. Peace out, and I hope you all have fun.